And good morning. I'm Rabbi Steve Moskowitz of Congregation Lador Vador, and this is Monday Musings, a 15 or 20-minute spiritual kickstart to the week. I am joined this morning by my friend Rabbi Missaghieh, who is the rabbi at Temple Israel in Hollywood, California. We have known each other, I think, going all the way back to the 92nd Street Y days, when you taught Derech Torah many years ago. We've seen each other many summers studying at Hartman in Jerusalem and learning together there. And I know also you grew up in Manhattan. So I hope even after 26 years out in California and serving Temple Israel, you still consider yourself a New Yorker. And just to add this, you're also a graduate of the University of Michigan. So we got to get a Go Blue in there.
Go Blue.
Go Blue. All right. We always like to have Michigan grads on Monday Musings. So Michelle, I just wanted to have you on the show. And I know we've been talking a little bit. You have a wonderful spiritual practice of every morning going for a walk, and people are often searching for ways to kind of manage and get through these difficult times. So tell us a little bit about that.
All right. Thank you. So I did grow up in Manhattan. I grew up on the Upper East Side. It sounds very fancy, but I actually grew up in like a 6-story pre-war, creaky old building, 1-bedroom apartment with 5 people. So I did not grow up in the lap of luxury, public school kid all the way. And, growing up amongst cement and lack of backyard and trees and all of that, I just coped. But now that I live in Los Angeles, I am so blessed to live in a house, blessed to have a backyard, blessed to live in a neighborhood that I can walk around. And so every morning I wake up and I get dressed and put on my mask and take my AirPods and my iPhone and listen sometimes to a podcast from Pardes, sometimes a podcast of NPR. Sometimes I listen to the Braver Angels podcast, and I just look around my surroundings and take in nature. And just this morning, I
have a show and tell.
I have a show and tell. I was walking and it was really, really windy this weekend. And so all the palm trees were blowing everywhere. And because part of what I'm doing in the morning is really being aware of what's around me, I noticed these beautiful bark from the palm trees were just scattered all over. And this is just one of so many. And the texture and the color and the smell, I just sort of take it in every morning. And every morning it's different. And it's really...
Have you not missed a morning?
Sometimes I take one morning off a week. I remember when I was saying Kaddish for my dad, Tuesdays was my morning off. So sometimes I take one morning off. And sometimes I even say to myself, you know what, if you're really tired, just go for a block or two and then come back. And for some reason, I just keep on going. So it's usually about a 2-mile walk I take.
Was this pre-pandemic that you did this too? No, it started with the pandemic.
100%. Because I think I'm working at home. This is my home. I'm working at home.
Nice office, by the way.
Thank you. All day. And so I'm not in my car. I'm not driving to work. I'm not doing errands as much. And I really felt like I needed to connect with the earth and with nature.
And what do you, and do you feel that it's always restorative?
Yeah, I really do. It's crazy. And again, I'm not demanding on myself. Like if I don't feel good, I take the day off. But I often push myself and say, just do a block or two. And then for some reason, I just keep going.
So I also wanted to just, but the sense of hearing is absent because you're listening to a podcast. Do you think that there's anything, I mean, it's not meant as a criticism, but it's the sights and and the smells you described.
Yeah,
Do you,
and also the people. Like there are all these people in my neighborhood, and I start saying hello to them, and I don't know who they are. And then eventually, sometimes we actually start talking to each other.
right.
And there's one person that I met who knew someone who knew someone who knew someone. And there are other women that I see that go together. And so I don't always put on my podcasts, and I'm free to turn them off whenever. But it's just this really beautiful time of being in community in a weird way. I go very early, often at 7 a.m. So I'm back and ready to work by 8:30.
And it's always by yourself?
Yeah, pretty much. On the weekends, I often go with girlfriends, but that's in addition to my morning walk for myself.
You need that. You need that sort of alone time on your walk. I think that's really important. I mean, just to kind of be at one. Obviously, you're significantly advantaged in terms of the weather in California, because there have been days where we have not gone outside in the past winter, especially with some of the snowstorms. So I'm quite envious that you can you can take that walk whenever you want.
Pretty much, yeah. And
yeah.
I recognize how blessed I am, and so I try to take advantage of it.
Yeah, and I think you should. I think it's really important, and I've tried encouraging people. And it's obviously been a very challenging February in terms of our weather, both in terms of cold and snow. But just going outside, even if it's a short walk, it does change your perspective because you don't feel cooped up. I mean, you don't feel trapped as much as you are if you just go outside and just take some steps. Even if it's just a short walk.
And I think this pandemic has also shown us how connected we really are in this world. And when we're in our homes, we forget that. But then when we see how disease spreads or kindness spreads, we remember that we really are connected. And so going out into the world is just that daily reminder. I think I recently learned that Reb Nachman of Bratslav said that every day we need to look up at the sky. And I think that that's teaching the same value.
It's wonderful. I find myself missing the oneg terribly. I mean, not the cookies, or the fruit. I'm like, well, okay, the pineapple's not in season. Where'd that come from? But I mean, just catching up with people. And I've often said, so much is learned from friends and with congregants, with those by the way conversations. Oh, by the way, this is happening in my life. And missing those is a tremendous absence.
It's true.
So we also wanted to talk about. I know you were touched very personally, more so than others by 9/11, and since that is still something that is the forefront of our memories here in New York, I thought if you're comfortable talking a little bit about it.
Sure. So my dad worked for the Port Authority of New York and New Jersey as a civil engineer for I think about over 30 years, and he worked in the World Trade Center. And the morning of 9/11, he happened to be late for work. He happened to have had a doctor's appointment. Otherwise, he would have been in his office on the 78th floor. So he was instead on the escalators going up to the elevators when the first plane hit. And so he was able to escape and save his life and watch other people, unfortunately, jump to their deaths. That event was so emotionally traumatic for him that it actually jet-setted the dementia that he would have gotten anyway. But the neurologist explained that when you go through a traumatic event, it jet sets whatever biologically you're going to have anyway. So that started his Lewy body dementia. And part of the result of Lewy body dementia is that you will die either through not being able to swallow or breathe or by falling. So unfortunately, 10 years after 9/11, he then fell on my mother, which caused his death and caused her brain damage. So I actually moved her out to Los Angeles to an assisted living home in Beverly Hills, just about 10 minutes from my home. And it's been really, really challenging to be there for my mother and other people who are struggling at home by themselves during this pandemic. I visit her only by appointment now, twice a week.
You can't just stop in unscheduled.
Can't stop in, and I can't even stop in. The appointments are outside, 6 feet apart, masked, temperature taken, and I physically haven't touched my mom since March.
Yeah, I think it just saddens me, and I think the people who are living by themselves, which even in your mom's circumstance, I mean, she is, her family's not there. It's so difficult.
Yeah.
And also, what you're also illustrating, the trauma of 9/11 extends much farther than just, even the few years that we thought, even though it's rebuilt, even though downtown's rebuilt, I mean, the trauma is still there. Very much so. And you have felt it personally. I mean, do you have an answer, in terms of we're going to be in this for certainly some time longer. I mean, it's not around the corner, although the end does seem in sight, although I just keep feeling like the goalposts keep getting moved. I mean, do you have an answer for how we respond to people? I mean, if you can put your rabbi hat on for a second, and what are we supposed to do for people who are by themselves?
Yeah, I'm just constantly reaching out. I'm picking up the phone. I don't expect older people, certainly my mother, to be able to manage technology as easier as young people can. Mm-hmm. And certainly there are exceptions. There are many older people who can manage that, but there are many that can't. And so I pick up the old-fashioned phone and I mark my calendar every week, every other week, to just reach out to people, check in, see how they're doing, with no agenda besides that. And it's heartbreaking, and it's lonely, it's frustrating, it's challenging.
It is very challenging. And the piece about the technology that you've said is, I don't think this is as good as our sitting in Jerusalem and in the courtyard of the Machon. Mm-hmm. It's nice to see you, but there is this technological hurdle, mm-hmm. And I don't think it's only age related. I think it's also emotional. I mean, if you've spent, the better part of your life, sitting next to someone and having a cup of coffee, as opposed to our children's age, who are just sort of like, my kids have sometimes said, yeah, I talked to him. And I was like, wow, when did you do that? It's like, we were texting. And I was like, that's not a conversation. Texting is not a conversation. Yes, it is. It's totally a conversation as far as they're concerned.
Right.
So, I do think it's very different for our children's age in terms of the technology, and they feel much more like we're in the same room, even though we're just on the same screen. Mm-hmm. Whereas you and I might not feel that. And I think people who especially have spent, most of their life, you get together for a cup of coffee or lunch or have someone over. And if you can't do that, it's not the same.
We still don't know what the ramifications of not being able to physically touch each other.
Yeah. For
a year and a half, 2 years, I don't know what it's going to be. We don't know what those ramifications are yet. And those of us who are lucky enough to still have children in our homes, or parents in our homes, or friends that we pod with, the simple act of just touching and being touched and being held, I'm sure there's going to be papers and papers and studies that will examine how it affected people to not be touched for over a year.
I think it's having an effect on those of us who are fortunate enough to have someone we can hug in our own home. But it's to not have that. And I do think that some of our kids are going to have fears of touching that will be there. I've often said that officiating at any occasion, whether it's a simcha or a funeral, I feel like I'm officiating with my arm tied behind my back, that I can't offer a hug, both of congratulations and of consolation. I mean, it's the only way that I know how to respond, and have to sort of like tug at myself because that's my go-to response.
Right.
And I think that. Go ahead, you talk, because this is.
We did this fabulous thing that I actually learned from a colleague, where whenever there's a deep simcha, so for example, on Friday I had a bris that we did online, that I invite everyone to put on their gallery view on Zoom, and for everyone to hold up their hands, and to see pages and pages of people holding up their hands to do the Yivarechecha Adonai v'yishmerecha, and to feel the whole community doing that with you, and to see all these faces and hands of people. It's not the same, you're right, but we're trying to capture something that we can't capture in the regular way right now.
Yeah, it's not the same. I think that's a wonderful suggestion. I love that suggestion, that everyone's sort of, in a sense, offering a blessing and a hug to the family. There is a very powerful moment for the Shiva minions that I've officiated at, when there's like pages and pages and pages of people, and they're all, and you could see them all at the same time, because it's not like it's staggered over the several hours. And so you see all these people who are responding to your grief, and they're just arrayed on a page, and it sometimes goes on for, as I said, many, many pages. It's not the same as someone being there and reminding you of a story, and you're sitting in your kitchen and it's like, remember when your dad did this, and you're like, I have no idea. But then, like that's when it really works, when someone tells you a story that you don't know.
Yeah, we're all just trying to reach for planks of wood. Malila from Hartman taught us an amazing midrash in the Talmud of Rabbi Kiva, who witnesses a storm, and all of a sudden his colleague, who he thought died in the storm, washes up on shore, and he says to his colleague, "How'd you make it?" And the rabbi says, "I found a piece of wood and I held on to it and I just floated ashore." And we can either fight these waves that are coming at us, or we can somehow grab onto pieces of wood that we might not have even known were there all along. Like I lived in this house for 8 years and had never gone walking in our neighborhood until this pandemic. It's crazy. How could I have not seen my neighbors and seen the trees and the houses and everything? But whatever, this pandemic led me to that daily walk. And that's been my piece of wood that I've held on to, along with many other pieces of wood.
Yeah, I think that's a beautiful image, and it's a beautiful story from the Talmud, and one that I didn't know. So I thank you for sharing it with me. I could have very well been in the same class and missed it. So, but I appreciate you telling that story. And I would just like to add, because I had one thought. The other thing we can do is offer that piece of wood to a friend. I mean, and I think that's what you've done in terms of saying, I've discovered this walk, and it's been in some ways an answer for me. It's not going to work for everyone, but we can just offer these pieces up to people, because we are all hanging on in one way in some way. And so we can, and sometimes, one of us is hanging on a little better than the other one. So we can kind of say, hey, this has worked for me. Hang on.
Yeah.
Uh,
Yeah.
and I think that's enormously helpful. I'm glad you discovered the beautiful nature that you live in. A part of it might have been that you were so busy fighting traffic to get to the everywhere in Los Angeles, right? That you're like, I gotta go. So like I don't have time to go for a walk. So there is that time now.
Yeah.
We can discover things.
Yeah.
Michelle, it's been great having you on the show. I'm really grateful for your teachings and for
you.
offering us this wisdom. So thank you for joining Monday Musings every Monday, 9 a.m.